Hey everyone, I wanted to go into a topic today that I talk to about athletes all the time, and it's proper easy running. It's like the bedrock of what we do. It's the majority of what we do, but for some reason, there's a lot of misconception out there. There's different terminology, different language, and I really wanted to bring this all together to hopefully give some insight into what we mean by easy running. And so, for those of you who haven't watched any of the other videos or followed along, my name's Brant. I coach with Team Run Run. I put out videos and such here with the Fast and Free Performance Coaching. And I love to break things down and share it with athletes. And so, part of my background, I've worked with athletes all the way from 2:15 marathon to 6 hour marathon and trails. I've helped over 25 athletes represent Canada internationally, and over 150 athletes qualify for Boston. And so, this is some of the language and knowledge that I share with my athletes when it comes to easy running and the bedrock of what we do. And so, the first piece I'll look at is I come at things primarily from a Jack Daniels system, so we would call it E-Day, but I'm going to explain kind of everything that some of the language maybe you've heard and try to make it a little bit more congruent because there's one thing we're really bad at in distance running is like common terminology. And so hopefully try to put everything together so we have a shared understanding here. And so the first piece I want to mention, as I did off the top, is just how important easy running truly is, right? Like it is the bedrock of what we do as endurance athletes, right? And so when you look at how this was built out through some of the history of the sport, Lydiard first discovering it, Daniels coming out like from a scientific lens and then applying that, his systems won multiple Olympic medals, age class records across distances, et cetera. One of the most popular books ever made for endurance sport is Daniel's running formula. And so when we look at the literature and we follow the history of sport, the ebbs and flows, we've had high volume periods, low volume periods. And what's really stuck is that easy running is not optional. It's the foundation, it's the layer of training that every other session that we do builds upon. And so when I talk to athletes who are looking for marathon success, that's primarily the athletes I'm coaching, we talk about how the easy running is key. And we have to break down a lot of things about that because everybody has different ideas about easy running. And so I'm hoping in this video, I can actually break down what that means, what it does inside your body, how much you need. That's, a little individual, of course, and then the mistakes most runners make and how we can lock you into the right place, effort, values, depending on which system you want to look at. And hopefully answer some of the common questions that I get about how you can make easy runs work and give you some clarity and confidence to tackle your training. And so the first piece I want to talk about is like, well, what even is easy running, right? So we're not talking about just like shuffling around or, jogging up and down at a stoplight, right? It's a controlled, steady effort where your breathing is relaxed. And the thing you've probably heard mostly is like hold a conversation without struggling, right? So from a physiological standpoint, we would define this as anywhere from, and it's a little bit nerdy here, but 59 to 74% of VO2 max or 60-ish to 70-ish, depending on the paper, max heart rate. But there's plenty more systems we can use, and there's lots of systems that work perfectly well. And I want to talk about those and how we make them kind of congruent. So some people have heard the 3-zone model, zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. So this would be zone 1, right? There's the RPE scale, which if you look at the research time and time and time again, the RPE scale comes out on top in terms of doing it. Now, the caveat to that is you have to fully properly understand what your RPE zones are and how those are calibrated to different like zones, paces, and intensities, right? So if you are somebody who understands your RPE really well, when we're talking about easy running, we're talking about anywhere from RPE 1 to 4 on a basic RPE scale. If we look at the Borg scale, kind of the OG scale, that goes from 6 to 20, right? It's supposed to correspond roughly with heart rate. We're looking anywhere from 8 to 12, maybe 13, depending on the person and what you're doing, right? Then there's the 5-zone model, which we're commonly using the Friel 7-zone. We've used those for. So this would be like zone 0, 1, and 2 would all fall into this easy running type range. Some other common term ones that would fall in this easy day range would be recovery, easy, or endurance, depending on the model. If you're looking at time to failure models, that's your all day. If you're looking at heart rate, we're looking, as I said, kind of, that 50, 60 to 60, 65, depending on the paper. Daniels would describe this as easy. If you're a big fan of the Norwegian system with the lactate monitored system, this would be like 0.7 to 1.5, maybe 2. You'd have to be really dialed in on that. So that's like what we're calling under your first lactate threshold, your LT1, right? So this is what I meant off the top where it's so confusing. There's so many different models here, right? And that's why I wanted to list them all because it doesn't matter what model you use as long as you're using it appropriately to do the easy volume that's important, right? And so when I tell my athletes and I'm talking about it, right, it's like, I want you to feel like you're running a little slower than you should. And so the reason why that is for a lot of runners, new runners in particular, right, we think we need to be going faster, right? And what happens is we know that there's not much of a difference in terms of the aerobic benefit that you get from going slightly faster. It's really negligible, right? But what will happen is you have an increased degradation of the peripheral muscular system, right? So I don't mean you're like degrading and falling apart, but you increase the soreness, the load, and the injury risk, right? And what we know is that consistency over time compounds to give you success, right? So success in the marathon is really a lagging indicator of great behaviors and training over weeks, months, and even years, right? And so what we want to do is we want to ensure that we're getting maximal benefit with minimal risk, right? And so this is why you'll start seeing a lot of elite athletes in the marathon, right? Who live by this idea, right? So they might race, like, one of my top guys who's looking to run, hopefully, in the low 210s this year, right? He can race low 5-minute miles in the marathon, but is doing his easy days at 7:30 to 8 minutes, right? So 2.5 to 3 minutes slower, right? Per mile. They're not embarrassed by it, and they know that those runs are building those engines. So when I'm talking to athletes, the people trying to qualify for Boston, maybe they're trying to run 4 hours or 3 hours, whatever it is, right? It's like, if this person who's trying to make senior national teams is not embarrassed by it and feels like they are getting gains out of it, you probably can too, right? And so I want athletes to think about that, because if this is the bedrock, this is the part we have to get right. Because if we don't get this right, what oftentimes I see athletes doing is they go too fast on their easy days. Then they're too tired when they get to their workouts. So they bomb their workouts and their confidence goes, and or they get injured. And then when they get injured, they come back and they think, I've missed time, I got to make up for it. And they just crank again, right? And so really understanding what easy running is, what it does, and how it works is really crucial to success. So if we want to think about why it matters or the science behind it, if you don't like science, you can skip this part. I know it's kind of nerdy, but we really want to understand why. And I think, as a psychotherapist and mental performance coach, that oftentimes if we understand the narrative and we understand the why, we're better able to implement it, right? So if you're like me and you think that way, this part is hopefully for you to help guide you to understand easy running. And so when you run easy, there's a ton of positive adaptations that are happening, right? So first one, capillary density. Your body builds more of the tiny little blood vessels in the muscles, right? And so what this means is it's better oxygen delivery, right? Better nutrient transport, better waste removal, right? More highways for the energy. So if you live in a big city center and it's crowded, just think, what would it be like if we had more highways, right? Things would be faster. And so the central question we're essentially trying to ask in endurance sport is, how do I continually better and faster move oxygen to the working muscles and remove byproducts? That's the central physiological question that we're trying to ask when we're trying to increase performance, right? So the second piece that we get from a positive adaptation standpoint is mitochondrial growth. So if you remember nothing from elementary school, you probably remember that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. That's literally all I remember from my elementary school physiology, right? Easy running is literally the thing that builds more of the power plants inside your cells. So what this means is you burn fuel more efficiently, you delay fatigue, and you can run longer at higher intensities, right? If you remember that there's fiber types, right? So we won't go into all the different fiber types, but generally we tend to understand that there's fast twitch and slow twitch fibers, right? As a marathon runner or an endurance athlete, we want more of those slow twitch. Now, caveat here, it's not that we want to ignore the fast twitch. There's a time and a place for that. But for the purposes of this, we're just going to talk about slow twitch. So when you're training for endurance, right, we want the endurance or the slow twitch fibers to fire stronger and longer, even if your fast twitch fibers get, your fast twitch fibers get better at endurance. We still want to go to those slow ones first, right? The fourth piece about what happens from a scientific lens, and there's more, but broadly, these are the four that are the most important, is fuel utilization. So this is probably the most practical or easier to understand, because we can understand like fuel in a car, right? If I have better fuel mileage, then I can go further, right? And it's cheaper, right? So easy running teaches your body to rely on more fat for fuel, and you spare your glycogen. I want to be clear, it's not like you're replacing, right? So it's kind of like a percentage thing. You just become more efficient, right? And if you're more efficient, this means in the marathon, you don't bonk as easily. Now, obviously, with some of the fueling stuff that we're doing nowadays, bonking is becoming a little bit less. But that said, you still need to do the easy running to get the central adaptation or the peripheral adaptation. Sorry. And so all of this stuff happens at a pace when it feels comfortable, right? Easy, right? So remember all those zones that I kind of went through, whether you're doing heart rate, pace, Daniels, RPE, whatever it is, right? All of that stuff happens there, right? And so you don't need to red line to get more fit. Now, I hate when we pick sides in our sport. There's like the 80-20 crew, the all zone 2 crew, the high intensity crew. Like, it's just garbage that we make these arguments, to be honest. Like, every athlete who's reached the pinnacle of sport and reached their potential recognizes that we need pieces of everything in here. And so, yes, this is a video about easy running. I'm starting a series on all the training paces and how it kind of comes together. So this is the first one because it's the bedrock. But you need to nail easy runs, and you don't need to red line to get fit. You will do red line stuff, but you don't need it to. The red line stuff does not get you fit on its own. You have to have the aerobic base first, right? And so we need to give proper respect to easy runs. I like to think of them as depositing money in the bank. Every deposit builds a balance that you can spend on race day, right? The question I get a lot, and you're going to hate the answer, is how much easy running do you need? And I would say it depends, right? So how many days a week do you have to run? What is your running history? What is your injury history? How much time do you have, right? What event are you training for, right? So when I get that question, it's a depends answer. And so I want to look at all the, factors that are coming into someone's life and then do that. Broadly, we can think about it this way. The more easy volume, whether that's just running, cycling, elliptical, swimming, bike, whatever, right, that you do, the better you will be. Caveats, burnout, peripheral fatigue, injuries, etc. But broadly, you can consider it this way. The more you do, the better you will be, right? And so if we look at Daniel's work, which was really one of the first really big scientific enterprises in terms of like proper training, he would note that 65 to 80% of your mileage should be easy. Now, most of the sciences also back this up. When we look at 80-20, that really came out of a paper that was looking at, triathletes and rowers and swimmers and runners and looking at broad distributions of training. Now, that is an aggregate over the year. It doesn't mean that every week needs to be that way, or every training session needs to be that way, or every block needs to be that way. But broadly, over a year and a multi-year cycle, typically a quad for Olympic level athletes, this tended to be the distribution, right? And so if you think about that, for somebody who's only running 3 days a week, 4 days a week, right? We tend to have this mindset, well, I got to punch, I got to go hard, hard, hard on each day, right? But if we think about this for a second, we back up to the science of why and, what we were doing here to try and get better at running, we need to do easy running. So I would rather, if somebody only has 3 days a week to train or 40 days a week to train, do as much easy running as possible, maybe some strides, maybe a smaller workout, but they will get more bang for their buck by doing easy running. I know this isn't popular. I know this isn't going to go viral on that. Excuse me, but it's the truth, right? So the more easy running you do, the better you'll be. The second piece is we know that durability, the ability to ward off injury, is higher the more volume you do, which is weird, right? At first, everybody thinks, and your PT say it, like I'm a massage therapist, I'm in that world, I see it. The more volume you do, the more risk you have to get hurt. Yes, but if you do it properly and you build it up properly, the answer is actually no. And we know this in the literature time and time again. Those athletes, there was just a paper out, I'll try to reference it here below, that said that those athletes with a 90-minute long run tended to be more durable than those who weren't, right? And so part of the reason is for this is that the more mileage you're doing, the slower you have to go to be able to sustain it without getting injured, right? And so when you look at how much easy running do you need to do, that question I get all the time, and I say it depends, everybody hates it, but that's why, because we want to keep you from getting injured, right? That's the risk. And the reward is race day or getting more fit, right? So we have to balance that risk. It's not easy, but if we start with the slower volume, right? So Pickett's RPE, heart rate, Daniel's zones, zone 1, zone 2, whatever it is, right? And probably go a little easier than you think. Because generally for most people, it's not the aerobic system that fails, it's the peripheral system, the muscular, the tendons, all that stuff that leads to an injury, which puts you on the sidelines, right? And so if you do the right amount of easy running, right, and you do it easy, right, and right being, different for every person, right, then you're better able to handle the demands of running and therefore better able to handle the demands of hard workouts, right? And so there's this weird kind of thing that everybody figures out eventually is that the more volume they do, the harder workouts they can do, and they recover better within the workout, like within your recovery, like in between the reps, but they also recover better the next day and subsequent days, right? And so if you're just doing hard runs, you don't get that recovery benefit and you don't get that boost to fitness benefit, right? And so this allows you to keep the mileage up without breaking down. Because what a lot of people do nowadays, especially with run clubs and some of the stuff we're seeing now, is they want to have high volume and they want to hit as hard as possible. And it's like those two things never work, right? But if you do the easy volume and you have appropriate workout distribution and workout intensities, I'll touch on those in later videos, then you can stack weeks and months and years of training together. And so when I talk to people, it's about not just where do you want to be in this build, but where do you want to be in 3-4 years. Anybody can come and run hard for a year and they might get lucky and not get injured. But if you try to do that over a longer span, I can almost guarantee you will be injured, broken, hurt, and quitting the sport. And I love this sport and I don't want to see people quitting because they did it the wrong way, right? And so again, I go back to that idea that I noted earlier, that the key and the most important aspect of training is consistency. And so consistency is over a long period. I'm not talking a week or a month or 3 months, because if we really want to see success, we're talking in months to years, right? Consistency is only possible if most of your training is sustainable. The hard stuff might be sexy and look great on Strava and great on Instagram, but it's not sustainable over the long term. Easy running is what makes success sustainable. So when I'm working with athletes, and this is an idea I'm working on right now to come out in a longer form in terms of the hierarchy of marathon success, you need to think about it as a pyramid. The bigger the base, right? And that's why we call it base training. The bigger the easy running, the higher the peak you can eventually build. So easy mileage is that base. Without it, your workouts won't have the same effect and your races won't reach the same level. I've touched on this a little bit, but this is the easiest mistake that I see to fix, and it's largely just ego or misinformation or lack of knowledge. And it's just running their easy days too fast. And so when we look at heart rate monitors, which have a massive variability in terms of how accurate they are, whether it's wrist or chest or arm, right? Or we look at incorrect RPE ideas. Oftentimes, oh, I got to run a little bit faster so it looks good on Strava, right? All of these things add up to what we commonly do too fast. I actually think it's a badge of honor to go out there and run real slow in training and then crush it on race day, right? And so, it's better fundamentally to run too slow than too fast. When you push the pace, you're no longer training the right systems. It's like you didn't get the right effect out of what you were trying to do, right? So you drift into what you may have heard us call junk miles. Too fast to be easy, too slow to be quality, right? And so when you do that, you don't recover as properly, you carry fatigue into your workouts and you risk injury, right? So remember, if we go back to that tenet of what's important, consistency, we don't want any of these things, right? And so a lot of times when I have new athletes come in, they're running their easy days too fast, or they're trying to, in the marathon in particular, I've done a video about this, push for the 20 miler at the fastest time, right? And they just get stuck year over year, build over build, right? Because their easy runs turned into medium hard runs and they didn't get any of the aerobic base building effects that they thought they were, right? And so as a rule of thumb, if you're in doubt, back off. No one is handing out medals for the fastest easy run on Strava. I can promise you, you will not get less kudos just because you ran an 8:30 mile versus a 7:50 mile. If your people truly care about you and like what you're doing, they're going to give you kudos anyways. And so one of the last pieces, and this is what I introduce like literally in the second email when athletes start working with me, is how to find your easy pace. And so broadly, I think we should triangulate in best scenario with the VDOT calculator. Jack Daniels, I'll link this below, with a recent race performance. I want to be clear here. It's not what I think I could race or the fitness I want to be in. That's a common mistake. Athletes will go, I want to run X in the marathon, so they'll put X time in the VDOT calculator. We're not trying to train to your aspirational goal. We're trying to train to your current fitness. And so this is where a lot of people make the mistake. To find your easy pace, put the VDOT calculator to a recent performance or current realistic performance, right? And then when we plug it in, it pops out the training paces. Now, I think, as I said, if we triangulate with, the VDOT calculator, right? Because, this is, why do we triangulate? The VDOT calculator gives you like great weather, good conditions, good flat terrain, etc. Right? So that pace range could be good for me in, let's say, Ontario here, right? In the fall. But in the summer, when it's stupid humid and humidity is 100% and we're in the 90s Fahrenheit or 30s, 40 Celsius, that pace is completely different, right? So this is why we want to triangulate with heart rate and RPE. And I find that when we combine the three of those together for athletes, we tend to get a more wholesome picture of where their easy running is being. So the first part is use the VDOT calculator. Realistic performance, current fitness, not future performance, right? Triangulate it with your heart rate model. So whether that's 50%, 60%, the zone 2 calculator model, whatever it is, we want to use them as a triangulation, right? And then your RPE. And so what's really fun is, when I start to see athletes come in who have been running at this kind of like, junk mileage type volume, right? And intensity, they come in, they drop it, and at first they're like, oh my God, I'm not going to get fit. What's going to happen, right? And then they do it for like 4 to 6 weeks. And then all of a sudden their paces actually come back up. But the intensity and the effort or the RPE or the heart rate that they were doing previously at that pace is lower, right? And so this shows us that we've actually started to make the adaptations that we need to make to improve fitness, right? So now you're starting to train at a pace or an effort or a heart rate or a zone that's tailored to your current fitness, right? And so this is why it's a range and why I like the triangulation, because some days you'll be on the quicker end, right? Oftentimes athletes will find the day after a 5K pace workout or a mile pace workout or the day after strides, they have a little bit more pop. That's okay. You can go at the upper end of the range if that's how you feel, right? Some days after the long run or tempo run in particular, you're at the slower end. Both are correct. Not every day has to have the exact same easy pace. This is why we want a range, and as I said earlier, a triangulation between pace, heart rate, and RPE. If you're running the same pace every day, you are simply not going to get the benefit. Remember, when we go for a run, we are trying to get the specific physiological response that we are looking for in training that day to drive adaptation further to get race performance. So, questions that I get asked all the time. Hopefully this is a preemptive answer session for you. But one I get whenever I give paces, probably 40, 50% of the time is, what if it feels too slow, right? I think that's fine. That's the point. Chances are you were probably going too fast before, so we have to recalibrate for you, right? You're not supposed to feel like you're working hard, right? Most elite athletes go slower than you think on their easy days. And if they are getting benefit, you can get benefit as well too. What if my run friends run faster? I see it all the time. I love run clubs. I have a great run club here in Kingston that I run with people. And I think they've been a huge boost to running. That said, there tends to be an overemphasis on the higher intensity and pushing. When I coach athletes who are going to run clubs, I encourage athletes to stick to your paces and don't let group runs turn into races or pseudo workouts, right? The purpose of training is not to show off your fitness, it's to build it. Show off your fitness on race day. The next one is, should you care about heart rate? And so as I've kind of alluded throughout this, it's like heart rate can be useful, but I want to be clear. I think pace and effort come first, because heart rate is so affected, and you know this if you're watching your HRV scores and such, by heat, sleep, caffeine, and we want to use it as a guide, not gospel. So I like it as a retrospective, like post-session kind of look and understanding, right? And so you can use it like on your watch if you want, but I wouldn't use it as a guide, as a gospel, like must, oh my God, I'm 2 beats per minute over, I'm not working, properly. As I said earlier, the variance in these heart rate monitors is huge, so we don't even know if they're correct. The second piece is like, if you haven't done a true max heart rate test, you don't actually know what your zones are. So there's a lot of variability. This is why racing and using the VDOT system tends to be a little bit better, because that's an actual performance that we know, right? And so like it, but don't treat it as gospel. Last question I get all the time is, can I run too much easy pace? Not really. Depends on the season, depends where you're at, but I don't know of many athletes who are just out there straight running easy volume and thinking that's what's going to get them there. It's a part of it, but it has to be balanced with quality work. So whether you want to look at 80-20 or 65-80% of easy, whatever, right? Somewhere in that ratio is the healthy option that's going to drive success. That said, I work with numerous athletes who actually get injured a little bit the more workouts they do. So that ratio is skewed a little bit 90-10, because at the end of the day, we're trying to master consistency rather than, nailing a bunch of workouts, right? Because again, consistency is going to equal success. So bottom line on easy running, they're not just filler. They're not just, things that you can skip and they don't matter because they're not a workout. They literally are the most important runs in your program. And it's what everything is built around and upon. They build endurance, they build muscular and tendinous resiliency so you can decrease your injury risk, and they build efficiency. So when we look at like the Daniel system, which I said that I kind of come from, he built this whole system on this principle, and Lydiard before him kind of really figured this out in New Zealand, is like run easy, run often, and respect the purpose of every session. If you can do that, chances are your success, whether you run 40 minutes, 50 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever it is, if you can nail those things, you're probably going to see improvement. So the next time that you go out the door and you head out for an easy run, don't fight it. Don't feel guilty, right? Know that you're building the foundation for your fitness. This is the thing that will let you go faster when it matters most on race day. I hope this answers some questions. I'm going to try and do a series where I do marathon pace and tempo pace and 5K pace as well on here, and talk about some of the training methodologies. So hopefully that is helpful. If you're interested, you can look down and do the VDOT calculator. I'll put the link below. If you found this helpful, I am trying to grow the channel, so hopefully you can hit subscribe. I feel cringy and hate saying that, but I'm told that's what I'm supposed to do. So I hope you enjoy this. You'll stick around. As I noted, I'm going to try to break down more of these training principles and show you, not just, how to run, but run smarter and run towards more success, both, from the physiological and training perspective, but then also from the mental performance perspective. So thanks for checking it out. Hope you enjoyed it and you learned something along the way, and good luck with your easy running.